Pamposh Dhar is a holistic healer who offers healing for the body, heart, and mind, and calmness for the spirit. She is a counselor, coach, Reiki healer, a teacher, and a meditation guide. She runs a Singapore-based company called Terataii. Today, Pamposh talks to us about why is it important to teach children about managing setbacks in life.
Hi all. We all encourage our children to do well in life, which we should. But how often do we talk to them about failure? Through my work with young people, I have become convinced that it's important to talk about failure as well as success. Before I share my ideas on why this is so, I want to share two experiences I've had with two young people in my counseling and coaching work. So the first of them came to see me, I think 2 years ago, something like that. He was in his early 20s. He had been studying away from home. His parents live in Singapore, and he'd been studying in the US. And he found he couldn't cope with his university degree, with his education. He first tried changing topics, but that didn't work either. And finally, he just told his parents that he wanted to come back home. And he did that. His parents were extremely supportive. So he wasn't being pushed in any way by his parents, but he was pushing himself. And when he couldn't quite manage the course, he almost gave up on himself. And when he came to see me, his mother kind of referred him to me, and she was afraid he might be suicidal. I don't know if he was suicidal, but he was definitely very depressed. And this, despite 2 years of therapy, he'd been in therapy with somebody else for 2 years, and I'm sure it had helped, but he was still very depressed. He was basically not doing anything. He didn't have the confidence to try something else, to try another course or to try working. He had just lost confidence in himself. But more than that, I mean, we all know about confidence, how to instill confidence in children. But more than that, I felt he was really embarrassed and he'd kind of given up on himself, like he couldn't hack it in life. So a lot of my work then became about talking about life. You know, life is a journey and a failure is a temporary setback. But I don't think all children or all young people, very young people, truly understand that because nobody talks to them about failure. As adults, we only try to encourage them by telling them stories of success. We seldom talk about failure. We seldom talk about our own failures as well. And anyway, I worked with this young man for some time, and a big breakthrough came when I shared a story of my failure early in life and how I had picked myself up, dusted myself off, and got on with life and done quite well. And he said to me, he said, I wish people would talk about failure. Nobody has ever talked to me, because nobody has ever shared a story like that with me, a personal story. So anyway, he really started his recovery. Then he went on to enroll in another course closer to home. And he also started working part-time. So that was very gratifying to see that change in him. But that thing that he said, you know, that people don't talk about failure really stayed with me. More so because I knew the family and I knew that his father had just lost his job. And his father's they're not Singaporeans. So having lost his job, he then had to go back to his own country. And eventually the father also recovered very well. He's in a much better job now back in Singapore. But obviously the boy would have been aware of all this, but no one had sat and talked about it, because we get embarrassed by our own failures and sort of try to brush them under the carpet. The second boy I counseled more recently, he is 18, and he comes from a dysfunctional family, I would say. So he was really looking forward to going to university, getting away from this dysfunctional home, and also stepping out into life. But he didn't do as well in his school exams as he'd hoped. And he started having panic attacks. So when he came to see me after this result, his exam result, he talked. I mean, I couldn't get a word in edgeways. He talked for half an hour, and I could see the nervous energy that was coming with the words. And he told me that he is now prone to panic attacks. So we talked about how to manage panic attacks first before we talked about the underlying issues. And we then went on to talk about, how he could now move forward. And we together came up with a plan for him to repeat that one exam. I also encouraged him to think of a plan B, because again, this is not the end of life. But these two experiences really made me understand that when you're very young, perhaps you don't see that life stretches on. It's really, as I said, a journey. And this is just a temporary setback. So this is why I've become convinced that we should talk to our children about failures as well as successes. And in fact, there is much to learn from failure. First of all, it is a sign that you are truly living. Because if you are trying new things, you are stretching yourself a little, you're stretching towards your own dreams, towards your goals, it's likely that at some point you will face a setback. If you like, let's say, if you're 30 years old and you've never faced a setback, then I think you should ask yourself whether you're truly living or just existing. Are you actually even trying to reach your full potential if there's no setbacks along the way? The second thing we can learn is how to do a course correction, because failure or setbacks, but particularly failure, where we feel that we did something wrong. All right, then how could we have done it better? How can we do it better the next time? So there's a lot to learn. Sometimes there's a lot to learn about yourself as well, and about life, about relationships, about managing work, developing strategies to meet your goals. It's not enough just to have a goal. How am I going to meet this? And if these strategies don't work, do I have a plan B, or am I going to give up on life? Because really, there's no reason to give up on life just because of one failure or even two. So, and I think it's a way of building resilience. It's a way about being realistic, learning to be realistic about life. It's also a way to build empathy for others who may be in similarly difficult situations. We learn also to take life in our stride. We don't get so embarrassed by a single setback that we don't want to meet friends, we don't want to go out, which is what was happening with that first young man. He was just lazing around all day long, doing nothing at all. So I think it's very important for young people to understand that failures and setbacks are a part of life. They're not the end of life. And they shouldn't get paralyzed by a single failure. Like, I don't know what to do now. It shouldn't be like that. So I encourage all of you, mothers, teachers, people who work with young people, share stories of failure and teach your children how to pick themselves up after a failure and move on with life. And since this is an Indian group, I would like to share one of my favorite couplets, which is in Urdu. गिरते हैं शह सवार ही मैदान जंग में, वो तिफल क्या गिरे जो घुटनों के बल चले. So again, if you've never failed in your life, ask yourself, are you really stretching towards your dreams, towards your hopes, towards your potential? Or are you merely living within your comfort zone, not trying anything new? And then just have that discussion with your children as well. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say today. Thank you for listening.